Yes, it's a reforms rush that we're seeing. The UPA government on a complete overdrive. Very critical reform measures that have been announced yet again after the cabinet's stamp of approval. What do these measures really mean? Joining us now, Dr. Montek Singh Ahluwalia, Deputy Chairperson of the Planning Commission. Dr. Ahluwalia, many thanks for being with us here on the show. Let me start by asking you about how the government is going ahead with big, bold and politically contentious reform moves. Why this reforms rush?
Well, I think there's no surprise on that. The Prime Minister in his address to the nation made it very clear that we face a lot of challenges. We have some domestic problems. We need to bring back the growth in the economy. We need to act on a large number of fronts. Most of all, in the short run, we need to get rid of bottlenecks in implementation of infrastructure projects. So I think what you're seeing in the last 2 or 3 months is a series of measures which actually spell out or fill out the agenda that more or less the Prime Minister indicated in his speech.
But Dr. Ahluwalia, what comes as a surprise is that after years of policy paralysis and a complete vacuum on economic decision making, we're seeing this sudden rush spate of reforms that have obviously come through. The government almost sounds desperate. It's a do or die situation. Also, with growth rates slipping so badly, the government does realize perhaps that it's now or never.
Well, I mean, I'm not quite sure that I agree with the tone that you're using, because you first complain that nothing is happening, and then when things start happening, you start wondering why are they happening. I mean, let's be quite clear. We were very aware that many of the things that needed to be done were politically contentious. Not all the allies necessarily were on the same page. The opposition was also opposing very often, maybe for the sake of opposing. So a certain amount of time was spent trying to create a consensus. And I mean, there's a limit to how far you can go. And once the government felt that it had done enough consulting, it just went ahead and acted. And I think all the steps that have been taken in the last 2 or 3 weeks, which you might call earlier politically contentious, and now they've been done, kind of reflect that broad category. I think in addition to that, the government has taken a number of steps, some of which are not yet fully complete, designed to get rid of implementation bottleneck. Like, for example, taking care of the fuel supply problem, right, which is affecting a lot of generation capacity. So I think a combination of measures that maybe politically were contentious, measures that are not necessarily contentious but are quite difficult. I think you've seen action, I think, in good time. It's precisely the point at which we want to give a signal to investors that the sort of impression which maybe some people in the media were spreading, that the government is not going to act, is actually not true, and the government has actually acted. Well, I welcome that, and I think so do the investors.
Absolutely. A big thumbs up coming from investors, from corporate India. But Dr. Ahluwalia, how do you respond to those who are saying that all these reform measures are pro-market, pro-business, but anti-people?
Well, let me say, I don't believe that. We have on a number of occasions made it very clear. None of the measures that the government have taken are anti-people. On the other hand, in a democratic polity, whenever somebody wants to oppose something, they're not going to oppose it on the grounds that this is a technically well worked out policy, but I think it's complicated. They're just going to say it's anti-people. So I think the attack on any policy as being anti-people is only a political posture. And I think people have to understand why this is being built up. And we've tried to do that, whether it's to do with diesel prices or FDI in retail. The fact is, if you go into those policies, it's very easy to see that they're not actually anti-people.
Okay, so Dr. Ahluwalia, do explain to our viewers why FDI in insurance, hiking the cap, why FDI in pension is something that will benefit the Aam Aadmi.
Well, it's very straightforward. I mean, FDI in insurance is not an issue because everybody agrees that 26% foreign investment in insurance is allowed. So we are not in a position where people are saying.
The standing committee is opposed to hiking it to 49%, and that's why the political
let me put it this way: the history of political processes shows the standing committees very often make recommendations. The government accepts some; it doesn't accept them. So let's be very clear about it. The test of any action is not whether the standing committee supported, or you go through any government, and I've sat through many cabinet meetings. It is simply not the case that everything that the standing committee proposes is accepted. So sometimes government looks at the proposals and says, well, we accept these, we don't accept these, and it goes to Parliament. Now, as far as the substance of the issue is concerned, insurance is very important. But if you want to reassure the investor, the person who is getting an insurance, that the company is well capitalized, you need to have a lot of capital. And Indian insurance companies will find it difficult to raise capital if they're not able to bring in more foreign investment. So they're keen to bring in foreign investment. Foreigners are keen to invest. The insurance company is fully regulated. It remains 51% Indian owned. So I can see no earthly reason whatsoever for objecting going from 26 to 49. I mean, any objection on that ground is ill-founded, simply because control doesn't pass to the foreigner, and in any case, the investment of the insurance funds is strictly regulated by the IRDA, and it's all invested in India. What this is going to do is going to produce insurance companies that are actually better capitalized. And you know, if I was buying an insurance claim, I would like to have an insurance company that is better capitalized. Now, with the capital being limited, it just means the amount of insurance they can write is limited.
Right,
and I don't see who's benefiting from that.
But Dr. Ahluwalia, your erstwhile ally Mamta Banerjee has gone on record to say that you're simply giving away people's pension money to foreigners.
Well, there may be some lack of understanding on what is happening. Actually, what we are doing is we are bringing in foreign money into the pension operations that are actually trying to raise people's money and invest it according to the IRDA regulations or the pension fund regulator regulation. So it's completely false to say that, you know, by raising the foreign investment limit, you're giving away the insurance fund to foreigners. What you are doing is you're allowing foreigners to build up the capital of the Indian-controlled company, which is attracting people to invest in it. Now, maybe this is not well understood, but that's what's happening. So I think the opposite, the notion that we are giving away insurance funds or people's money to foreigners is totally false.
All right, Dr. Ahluwalia, just to take forward what you had just mentioned, the fact that the government tried to do political consensus building on some of these politically contentious and tough reform measures, and that was something that obviously did not come through. And now the sense that one has is that the UPA government is saying enough is enough. We're going forward with our reform agenda despite the political opposition. Is that the sense that one is getting of the intent of the government?
Well, I think I wouldn't want to put it in political terms, because I think for that you have to ask the more political members of the cabinet. But what the government is saying is that, look, we have a job to do, and we're determined to do it, and we're willing to wait to build up a consensus, and nobody should feel that we're not consulting. But when the time comes that it's time to act, there's been enough consultation, we're able to do that. And I think the government has demonstrated that. It's done that in areas that are politically contentious. It's also doing it in areas which are, from a bureaucratic point of view, complicated. But I think they need to be done.
But Dr. Ahluwalia, what differentiates today's reform measures from the measures that took place a few days ago is the fact that these measures require parliamentary approval, and that's why the government's political consensus building skills will come to test to ensure that these can be passed on the floor of the House.
No, that's absolutely right. I mean, I think the government, having considered what the Standing Committee has said, has accepted some of the things that the Standing Committee wanted. It doesn't agree with others, and now is going back to Parliament. So it now will face the test of Parliament, but at least the government will be in a position to say, Look, we made it very clear what we want. We took the matter to Parliament. I hope that the management of consensus in Parliament, etc., will go well. And Parliament is supreme as far as making laws is concerned. I think the government would be able to say, well, look, we did our best. If Parliament doesn't pass these laws, well, that's a different issue. And of course, we have to address that issue. But I think nobody can say that government is holding back from taking the steps that it has to take. I mean, it is doing its dharma, and now Parliament will do its.
All right, the government's doing its dharma, the Parliament will have to do its dharma. Dr. Ahluwalia, today's measures don't stop at just FDI. There's also the National Investment Board, the Competition Bill, the 12th five-year plan, of course, all these getting an approval from the Cabinet, the government taking these measures clearly in a sort of a desperate way.
Hang on. I want to clarify one thing. I mean, the National Investment Board is an idea that's being processed, but it didn't come up in the Cabinet.
Okay.
The plan was approved. The plan does contain a proposal based on the discussion in the Planning Commission that we need something like a National Investment Board. But you know, a plan approval is an approval of a very broad range of policies. I've seen some news reports saying the Cabinet cleared the National Investment Board. That proposal is being processed.
Okay.
But it wasn't actually on the Cabinet agenda.
All right, fair enough. We're glad
the
that
others, of course, were the Competition Bill, the 12th plan being cleared, that of course is there.
So Dr. Ahluwalia, is there more coming? That's my last question to you really. Are we going to see this reform overdrive continue?
I'm very hopeful that many more steps need to be taken. I mean, I started off by saying that we need to get rid of implementation obstacles in infrastructure. Government has taken a number of steps to take care of the fuel supply problem affecting the large generation capacity that's been created. Now, you know, remember, the fact that we created so much generation capacity is itself a major achievement. I mean, last year we put up 21,000 megawatts of generation capacity, which is what was done in the whole of the 10th five-year plan.
Right.
But fuel supply didn't move. And we have to take care of that problem. So when you say, is a lot more needed? Yes, a lot more is needed, and I hope it'll get done.
All right, we do hope
Whether
a lot.
you call it reforms or, you know, just simply implementation, that's a separate issue. I think we use the word reforms too loosely.
All right, fair enough, but we're still calling this the second wave of reforms coming just a few days after we've seen some of those big, bold moves from the government. Dr. Montek Singh Ahluwalia, many thanks for joining us and sharing your views on the government's big measures that were approved by the Cabinet today. Dr. Ahluwalia there speaking exclusively to NDTV.
India's #1 news app just got even better. Download NDTV's new app. Fully optimized for retina display, full screen view, faster response time, and Sudoku. NDTV's new iPad app. Download now.